So people have responded. Finally, people have actually responded. So, it's not just because I've seen a lot of the discourse online. Why don't these brands just show their factories? Which is funny because this is how you know a lot of these people that are commenting on these things don't do any research. Because if you just Google, you can find the locations for the factories of a lot of luxury brands, especially brands that are more transparent. Like Louis Vuitton, you can find a lot of their, manufacturing hubs and factories in France. The same thing with Hermes. You also know about the Louis Vuitton factories that they're building in the US. You know about these things. They're very clear to see. But yet these people still want to believe that they only produce in China. Like, people just don't want to do any research. And so we have now seen trade groups for luxury brands and in regions where luxury brands are from, especially France, pushing back and pushing for litigation against people that are spreading this misinformation. So as you can see, the FHCM, which for people that don't know what that is, that's the Fédération de la Mode, which, coordinates Paris Fashion Week. They also coordinate things like Haute Couture Week. So they are, circulating a position paper calling for policymakers to make an immediate action to stop an unprecedented widespread disinformation campaign about the origin of luxury goods. Now, this is another thing that needs to be said because a lot of people are saying that, there's no way they can sue because they'll be lying anyway. Well, this is proof that they're clearly not lying because they are literally pushing for litigation against misinformation. They're taking it to the courts where things have to be above board and things have to be factual. The evidence has to be factual, not just, statements on TikTok. You actually have to come with evidence in a court of law. So that's something that needs to be said. And I know a lot of people that like to run with their narratives will not look at stories like this. They'll not watch this video probably because they just want to run with, whatever narrative they want to run with. But like it says in the article, France's luxury trade groups are quietly fighting back against the flood of counterfeiters pushing luxury super fakes on social media. Over the last week, the Fédération de la Haute Couture et de la Mode, Committee Colbert and Union de Fabricants, the French Association for Promoting and Defending Intellectual Property, have circulated a position paper to French and European policymakers calling for immediate action to stop an unprecedented widespread disinformation campaign about the origin of luxury goods. The call to action is in response to the viral spread of content posted on TikTok and other social media platforms over the last few weeks, suggesting that European luxury goods from brands like Chanel and Louis Vuitton are manufactured in China before being relabeled as made in France or made in Italy. The videos, which pose a serious fake news problem for luxury brands, were posted by creators claiming to be the Chinese manufacturers, responding to the prospect of sky-high US tariffs by offering American consumers the opportunity to buy cut-price luxury knockoffs. Also, I think so people like to overestimate things because I think it helps push their point. Now, it isn't to say that luxury brands don't produce a certain amount of goods in France and then call it made in France when the origin of other places, it might be partially made somewhere else, right? But how the law works, like the actual law, if they're doing things in a legal way, not to say that everything brands do is legal. We've seen many cases of brands, operating with third-party manufacturers that are operating with illegal practices. So not to say that everything they do is legal. I'm not here to defend luxury brands blindly. However, for the most part, they have to, produce in a legal way. And that means that a certain percentage has to be made in a country for it to be from that country of origin. I think it's about 70-something%. So that could mean that they could take components, they could ship components from a different country and assemble the whole thing in a different country than it's made in that country. But technically it is made in that country because just because raw materials come from all over the world doesn't mean that where it's manufactured, it isn't made. Like I've talked about this and I use this analogy all the time. In the car industry, components of a car come from all over the world. There are so many components to a car. Every component is not just made in one country. However, all those components get shipped from all over the world and then it's constructed and made in that host country, and therefore that car is therefore made in that country. I think people, I've seen a point where people are like, well, the leather comes from here, so how can they say it's made in Italy when the leather doesn't come from Italy? And it's like, just because a raw material comes from a country, if the whole product is made in Italy, it's made in Italy. That's like every industry. That unless we're going to start saying that cars are made in Brazil, France, USA, Mexico, Germany, like all at once. Like, unless we're going to do that, where something is manufactured is where it's made. I think people really mix that up. I've seen people mixing that up online a lot. But let's read on. It's a flagrant case of promoting counterfeiting, said the FHCM executive president Pascal Morand. It is misleading and deceiving consumers. UNIFAB Committee Colbert and FHCM have pushed for policymakers to strengthen measures aimed at banning the spread of such content and called for international cooperation to prevent its distribution. It is imperative to put an end to this defamatory disinformation about the entire luxury industry, the position paper said. This defamation occurs in an uncertain geopolitical and economic context and severely harms the preservation of intellectual property, which is the only guarantee of product authenticity for consumers and investment in innovation and the preservation of jobs in Europe. And it's funny because the writing was on the wall. Like, this was always going to happen. When I saw this whole thing happen and, people spread all this misinformation, and I remember in the first video I posted about this whole thing, I was like, I wonder how long it's going to take for people to take legal action, because there is no way that a luxury industry is going to sit back and take all this misinformation when, a lot of their branding is around like mystique and also aura and stuff like that. And this misinformation is like destroying that in a way. And then also France as a country, luxury fashion is one of their biggest exports. It's what they're proud of. A lot of the richest men in the world that come from France are in the luxury industry, people like Bernard Arnault. So they have a lot to defend. And I knew, especially from France, the policymakers would come knocking eventually. I just knew that was going to happen. It was so inevitable. Luxury brands is getting their desserts after years of selling shoddy products. Well deserved. Yeah, I agree with you there. Because I've said these luxury brands have themselves to blame. The reason why, even though it's still misinformation, why it's so easy for people to believe all this stuff is because luxury brands have cut so many corners to where all this stuff is believable. So they have themselves to blame. It's their fault. And I hope that from this situation, they learn that they need to, one, be more transparent with how they produce. And two, they need to stop cutting corners, because then it wouldn't be so easily believable. So it's definitely their fault to a certain extent. And it's ridiculous people are bitching about markup like it's something new. Sure, prices are out of control, but high markup has always been around. Yeah, exactly. And no one is forcing. Another thing which I don't understand is no one is forcing anyone to buy these luxury goods. Like, no one is actually forcing you. Like, no one has a gun to your head. Like, you must buy this Hermes bag. You must buy this Birkin. You must buy this Kelly. So I've never understood, like, why people are so, like, mad about it. Like, no one is forcing you to buy it. I personally love fashion. I'm a big fan of fashion, obviously, and I don't own any luxury brand from any luxury bag from any luxury brand. Like, I just don't care for it. It's not what I love about fashion. You can be into fashion and not buy those bags. And if you buy those bags, there's nothing wrong with that too. People spend their money on whatever they love. If you've worked hard for your money, some people spend it on holidays. Some people spend it on watches. Some people spend it on cars that they don't need. Some people spend it on boats, yachts. Some people spend it on, different things, right? So I don't know how it's any different. I just don't understand. If that's what you value, that's what you value. I think my personal thing, though, is that I just want brands. I want people to boycott brands until they provide the quality. The price is not the issue because it's luxury. It's always going to be too expensive. It's kind of what it is. But it's kind of this promise that they actually delivered on before with the brands that they don't now, that makes me really angry a lot of the time. I think that social media has probably played the largest role here. More than any other space, it has the power to mobilize entire groups of people against large conglomerates. Very power to the people. Yeah, for sure. Would be great if conglomerates finally implemented those blockchains to track the item in the creation process. I mean, we've been asking for that. And I remember a point in time when they were essentially claiming that they would do that. But I don't know what happened to that. It seems like they backtracked on that and, that was the end of it. So yeah, that was a bit of a shame, to be honest. But yeah, it was great when they actually cared and it seemed that they were going to be transparent, but all of that went out the window shortly after. So yeah, big shame. But yeah, so we are now seeing legal action hopefully be taken soon. I definitely want a lot of these people spreading misinformation to be sued, because do your research. Like, if you're going to report on something, just do some research. Like, you can't spread misinformation over and over again and make loads of money. Like I said, with the YouTuber that was getting millions of views just saying any old rubbish on the internet. So I think she deserves it. If they seek legal action against her, I think she deserves it, to be honest. She definitely deserves it. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.